these figures are quite frightening. And I think it does go to the question, it was always going to be the case, our nation would be challenged by this pandemic, but it's important to note a couple of things. Firstly, underemployment, the number of underemployed Australians was already a record high before the pandemic. And that's really important to understand, because Labor has been calling on the government to respond to record underemployment even prior to the pandemic hitting. That's important to note. It's also important to note that the Labor's call to broaden out the Jobkeeper package to cover the sectors most affected has not been listened to. And it is very unfortunate that the sectors most affected have the highest proportion of casuals, for example, and therefore are being given the least support by the stimulus package. And this is why the government needs to attend to this. This is just the beginning of what is going to be increasingly frightening figures. And behind every number, as we know, there's a worker and their families. And they will, of course, they will be dealing with this today. We need to think about them. So just to finish off before I turn to the leader, underutilisation, almost 20%. Underemployment, 1.8 million. This is a great challenge for this nation, and the government needs to consider what else it does to look after those people now that are unemployed and those people who face the prospect of underemployment and unemployment in the very near future.
Well, thanks very much, Brendan. What these figures reveal is that some time ago, 600,000 less Australians, 594,000 to be precise, less were in employment. That's a devastating figure. They're all people with families, with the need to put food on the table for their family and their kids. They're people who are our friends, our relatives, our neighbours, people in our community. They're people also who won't be receiving the sort of income that you get in work, which then helps stimulate the economy. And that's the problem here, is that there will be a cumulative effect, not the least of which because when we look at the Jobkeeper program, the government is still leaving people behind, particularly the most vulnerable, our casual employees, people in whole sectors like the arts and entertainment sector aren't getting the support that they need. The government needs to respond to this. We thought this week, frankly, Parliament coming back, budget day 2 days ago in the normal calendar, that we'd see a response from Josh Frydenberg of substance. What we got was a speech out of Seinfeld, a speech about nothing, with no substance, just a few old figures put together, a few press releases collated, and a speech which will only be remembered for Josh Frydenberg's coughing fit. Nothing else, because there was nothing else happened during that day. In contrast, Labor is looking towards the recovery and looking to how it needs to happen. We're putting forward practical suggestions about JobKeeper and JobSeeker. We're putting forward practical suggestions in areas like housing and construction that's due to fall off a cliff in just a few months' time when we look at the projections. Before this government, it's all about day-to-day political management. And there's nowhere where that's more evident in the last few days than their rediscovery of the bushfire crisis. In a few minutes' time, David Littleproud will stand up and give a ministerial statement about it. What we heard was when the cameras left, the political imperative to act left as well when it came to this government's response. We have people still living in caravans, people showering in community facilities, people who have suffered from the drought and then bushfires and then the coronavirus pandemic, getting a triple whammy. And what the government has done in today, announcing additional funding, for example, for aerial firefighting, is do something that we wrote to the Prime Minister on the 22nd of November last year. that was necessary. But it was dismissed. There were no COAG meetings then, you might recall. None. No response on an appropriate level. And when there was finally a response, the ad was ready to go. The marketing campaign was up there within a couple of hours with a donate to the Liberal Party button attached. What we actually need in this country is a government that has vision beyond day-to-day politics. But what we're getting from this government is just that. So we'll respond to David Littleproud's ministerial statement, but we'll also respond, and the theme of my vision statement on Monday can be summed up in one word: jobs. That needs to be the focus of the government, making sure that we recover in a way that builds strength and resilience in the economy. I'd ask Jim to make some comments.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Too many Australians lost their job in April because of a deliberate decision by the government. The unemployment queues are longer than they need to be because too many Australian workers have been excluded from the government's Jobkeeper program. Unemployment will be higher for longer because the government is bungling the implementation of the wage subsidies. Now, as Brendan said, unemployment and underemployment have been turbocharged by this crisis, but they are not new challenges. For some time now, there's been an issue with insecure and precarious work, with underemployment, with underutilisation. The labour market has been weak for some time. The government desperately wants Australians to believe that everything was perfect in the economy and then along came the coronavirus. But underemployment has been an issue which has hung around for too long. It's been turbocharged by this crisis. Unemployment and underemployment will be worse than it needs to be because the government's taken a good idea in Jobkeeper and badly implemented it. Too many Australians are heading off to Centrelink as a deliberate consequence of the government's decision to exclude them from the Jobkeeper program.